All right, good evening. Welcome back, everybody. Thirsty Thursday, number 55. Tonight, we are honored to have Chief Leeb with us tonight. We're going to be talking about places of worship and fires in those types of buildings. So it's going to be a great show, I can tell you, from the last couple minutes that we've been talking before the show started. Great conversation already. So without much further ado, let's get this rolling. Cheers, gentlemen. It's good to see everybody.
Cheers.
Chief, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's just get right into it. For those of us that may not understand, what is the big concern? Why would we talk specifically about fires in places of worship, Chief?
Well, so the fire service has a history of losing firefighters, battling fires in places of worship, whether it's a synagogue on Thanksgiving Eve in 1979 when 2 volunteer firefighters on Long Island lost their life, or we're talking about Muncie, Indiana with a lightweight truss where a firefighter lost his life, or we're talking about the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where firefighters lost their lives in a church fire in a church that was over 100 years old. So the features of these structures demand that we take a more cautious approach and that we alternate our tactics and strategies on how we lay out our incident priorities, similar to the way we would in the difference between a residential or a commercial fire, right? We should not be attacking a commercial fire utilizing residential tactics. Likewise, we should not be using residential or commercial tactics necessarily for a place of worship fire. We need to make sure that we are taking the steps that best protect us and also account for the occupants of the church, which, by the way, they're almost always out by the time we get there. So we become the life hazard.
Okay. All right. One of the things that we had talked about was that I think I had sent you before was we talk about the old style churches, like the very historic buildings, and then the newer style lightweight construction. Same concerns for both of those buildings?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's similar concerns, right, depending on the construction features. Both are going to have a lot of voids. Both have a lot of ornamental properties of it, but a lot of times it'll be wood that'll have some type of a stucco or plaster on it that makes it look, especially in the newer ones, that make it look like it's an older concrete or block construction. The big problem when we talk about the newer places of worship is the lightweight construction, right? Once the fire goes from a content fire to a structural fire, all bets are off, and we're going to see early collapse and a fire that involves the entire structure. And I know we were talking earlier about a recent fire in New Jersey, right? That they had a fire on March 21st at the Fountain of Life Center in Florence Township, and some of the early photos of that, and there you have one now, show that it may look like they have a shot at saving that. But that top of that where that smoke, that volume of smoke that's coming out of there, and the videos of it, there was a little bit of velocity in that smoke coming out as well. It was starting to get angry. We already have a fire that's probably involving the structure. That's probably 50 or 60 feet up as well. So that is going to be a very challenging fire for the fire department to put out. And indeed, they didn't put it out, right? The entire structure wound up being a loss. But, ideally, right, how do we protect those structures? The best way is demand that they're sprinkled beforehand, right? That way we have a fighting chance from keeping it from involving the structure. But in that fire there, we need to get inside, check thermal imaging, use our cameras, have a 2.5-inch line so we could reach the highest areas of that place of worship and give it a shot. But if we don't see a difference right away, then that's game over. And I would not be spending all that much time in that structure. When I saw that, I saw people tweeting out photos of that early on in the operation, and I was immediately thinking to myself, please don't stay in there very long. That's going to be a loss. We have a serious our history in these is very serious. Again, talking about that we lose firefighters, and we very rarely have a legitimate save in a place of worship. Again, unless we get it with that first or second hand line, and there's the picture of it the next morning. But it's the way these are built. We don't, they didn't lose anybody in that. No civilians, no firefighters, and too often we've lost firefighters in those fires. So we have to recognize it for what it is. Sometimes, simply put, sometimes we're dealt a losing hand, and you don't play a hand that has a 2, 3, 4 the same way you would if you're holding 3 aces in your hand, right? They had no aces there. They were behind the 8 ball, dealt a losing hand, and from all reports that I've seen on that, they handled it appropriately. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it was a total loss, but that wasn't due to the actions taken from the fire department.
Hey, Chief, real quick. This is just kind of running through my head. Just for a minute, pretend I'm the engine boss, and I'm coming to you for some advice. And I'm going to say, okay, look, Chief, as a engine company officer, I have my defaults. Whether I'm going to a residential structure, I have a certain default. Commercial structure, might have another default. But here I'm going to a building that I know probably has a very large uncompartmented fire area that I have to deal with. Part of that structure might be commercial. Part of it might be residential if it's attached to the rectory of a church. Part of it might be a place of assembly. So I've got all these different, balls in the air. And the reason I bring this up is, and you guys probably remember this. I'll be very clear. I was not on this fire, but I can't remember. Bob, you can give me the history of it. But before I retired from up in Ocean City, we had a fire in a basically a soup kitchen area of a church right across from City Hall. The fire went from the grade level up the stairs into the rectory of the church, where the pastor, we wound up having 2 fatalities and 1 injury. So it went from the area of I'll call it like a service area up the stairs into a residential area, and then because of open doors, it went into the large uncompartmented fire area of the church. So as a company level officer, when I have 3 different structures in one, where do I start?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. You had this. I just took some notes because there's so many different little parts of that to kind of unpack. So we know that in the areas when there's a rectory, right, we're going to have employees there. If we have a soup kitchen, we're not only going to have employees, but we may have parishioners of the church. A lot of them also have a daycare, and a lot of times the daycare may be in the basement. So we have, again, when we talk about incident priorities, right? Life is going to be our primary function there, at least initially, right? Until we account for them. Now, oftentimes the rectory and the other areas, the schools, would be a separate building. But you're talking about one where it's the same building, or they're connected or interconnected. So we have to make sure that we're sending somebody to where the life hazard is. We're targeting where the life hazard is to get them out. Rectory in the middle of the night, different incident priorities, right? We want to get to the sleeping areas as opposed to a soup kitchen or an area that we know has a daycare and may have 20, 30 children in it, and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. So very different incident priorities in the challenging part for the life hazard. But ideally, that's going to simultaneously be happening with the stretching of a hand line. Now that's going to be very dependent on staffing. In the FDNY, we have adequate staffing, so we do everything simultaneously, but depending on your staffing, you may have to do it sequentially. So by the time you get around to doing some of the later getting to some of the later objectives, you may not have that time anymore. But hopefully you have enough staffing where you could stretch a hose line, get that initial water on the fire while we're evacuating people out of those other areas, because the fire may have started in a separate area of that structure. Those people that are in, maybe it's the soup kitchen, might be in the basement. They may not even be aware of a fire. Likewise, the fire may have started in a below grade area. In the case of the Ebenezer Baptist Church fire in Pittsburgh in 2004, That fire began in the basement. And when it killed firefighters, it was because they had a collapse of the bell tower and part of the main ridge pole, and that collapse occurred several hours after the fire started. In fact, there had been a flashover in the basement, and they had some firefighters that were seriously injured, and the incident commander actually went to the hospital to check on the injured firefighters. And it happened when he wasn't on scene. I believe the safety officer was the incident commander when that happened. And actually, I believe he was one of the fatalities at that fire. So excellent points when we talk about these other uses of the church. And, places of worship are the center of communities, right? And that is even more so when you have low and middle income communities, right? Where it's serving the purpose of soup kitchens. It's serving the purpose of the community center. There's so many different things. So there's people are at these places at all hours of the day and night, and not understanding the community you work in and where people would be within the structure is very, very important to how we are going to battle these fires.
Chief, I got a follow-up question for you. So in that case, do you agree that a hand line should be stretched to keep the fire away from where the victims would be, and the first due truck is trying to get his victims out? Is that a good tactic for that?
Yes, if we're able to. So if we know we have a fire in the main area of the church, right, the place where people worship, and maybe in the nave, right, the center area of the church, or the transept, which is the place that makes the crucifix of the cross. Those are the two main parts of the church when you go inside. If we have fire in that area, we want keeping the fire away from the other area would be putting the fire out. If we're trying to be just defensive and we're writing off part of the structure to keep it away from where the occupants are, then that would change our priority to we're writing that off. But we want to protect the exposure, which could be the rectory, a soup kitchen, or school, depending how well connected or attached that it is. Most of the time, when you see like the bingo hall or anything in the place of worship, it's usually in the basement under the main area of the church, where a lot of times the schools and some of the other facilities are a little bit separated from it. So you have a fighting chance to say, all right, this part of the structure we're going to write off, but we could save the rectory, or we could save the school part and make sure everybody's out of that area.
So the church that my family actually attends, they built on and added a new like center or like worship area. Each addition was a new worship area. So the previous worship area has become an auxiliary place. So like they'll put like a daycare in the one, and then the original sanctuary area is now storage or whatever. So not only in this facility are you dealing with the main area of worship with like huge ceilings and all this kind of stuff, you have an area that's a little bit smaller, but now has probably a lot higher life hazard during the day. With like the kids going in there, like I think our church actually runs like a school during the day now. And then now you're also, they get to that original one, which is storage, and who knows what they've got in there, how high it's packed, all that kind of stuff. So it's just, again, it's knowing your area, your buildings, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So now each time they change the use of it, right? They're probably doing some type of renovations. And now it wasn't designed for whatever they're using it for now. But we're seeing more and more of these places. Economic times have been tough. So donations aren't what they were. So how do they, they run more bingo nights. They do more spaghetti nights. They do more daycare, whatever it is. So they're occupying and putting more people in some of these spaces, and spaces that they weren't designed for it. During COVID, churches that they had one area that was used for worship, and then next thing you know, they were using the basement as an overflow so they could be socially distanced, or areas that weren't made for that. Some of those are still using those extra spaces for people to that maybe don't want to, maybe the elderly that still don't want to be packed in a place of worship. with everybody else. So even you could be there for a regular worship time and have areas that traditionally wouldn't be occupied during the service. They also have areas where young children will go into a different area and hear a children's version of the service. So that could bring other people, young people particularly, into other areas that you may not expect them to be.
Yeah, and Chief, to your point, I think that we need to be a little bit interactive, if you will, or lack of a better term, nosy. For example, up there in Ocean City, guys, I haven't been there for several years, but it's roughly around like 109th, 110th Street, give or take. St. Peter's, the Lutheran church up there. They had a section that was used for a summer camp in the back, and so there'd be a high occupancy during certain areas. But then they started using it for a shelter, in cold weather and everything else. So we either had maybe 14 or 15 youth group people staying overnight in a church. When we go to a facility like that, a place of worship, typically at nighttime, we're not thinking high occupancy. We're thinking maybe a maintenance crew, a cleaning crew, or very minimal occupancy. But then when we have literally bunk rooms back there in the back of the church, so that might be something to consider also. And how do we keep on top of that? I mean, because all these churches they're trying to perform and provide so many services to the community, and they have a lot of tentacles out there. But how do we ascertain that this place might have an occupancy of 14 to 20 people at nighttime that we wouldn't expect?
Yeah, great points. So part of it is maybe do pre-plans on them, drive around the area. So you could easily miss it if you're just relying on driving around. So I think for a lot of these places of worship, you should have a pre-plan. It should be the site of training and drill for sure. This is the time of year, my local parish, they do after school childcare, and they do a summer program. And this is when they're advertising that. So even if you pass by, you'll see that advertisement for it. So you know that. But I think we shouldn't just rely solely on that. That's obviously good, seeing the area. Too much the firefighters have their phone on them. They're looking down instead of sizing up their area whenever we're out of quarters. I think that's important to make sure that we're paying attention to our surroundings, because it could be a block you go down once every couple of months. And if you miss a new building going up or a type of construction, that's an opportunity that's kind of lost forever. If once they close up those walls. So just really knowing your area, getting out there and being familiar with what's happening, especially if you live in the community, then you'll have even more knowledge of how these places are operating. But generally speaking, like you said, I wouldn't expect people to be sleeping overnight other than the rectory, but times are changing. You could expect people in different places at all times. And the more we know the building, the better familiar we are with what they're doing, the better we can protect them.
No, and agreed, Chief. And and Bobby, Mike, and Ben, I don't know if this is still in existence or not, but just to kind of pass this along, when we were starting our chaplain program back in the fire department, there was something called the Ocean City Ministerial Group. So all the different denominations actually had a monthly meeting of all of the, whether it was a rabbi, a priest, a reverend, whomever, they got together because they would share information with each other. And what I found very valuable about that was they would give you a lot of information, because if here's the head guy in charge of Lutheran church or the Baptist church or the Catholic church or the synagogue, whomever, you had an opportunity to look at them face to face and say, hey, is there anything we need to know to help you? Help us help you. So if those types of groups are still in effect, to your point, Chief, that might be a good pre-planning tool to be able to talk to them, because they know their programs. They're the ones who are administering these programs, and say, hey, we got 25 kids coming in for summer camp in between July this and August that. So we can kind of plan for that inevitability versus being surprised, because these kids are going to arrive on a bus. They're not going to have cars in the parking lot where we show up at 0:30 and see 12 cars in the parking lot, and we assume that the occupancy is based on the how busy the parking lot is. There's not going to be a car there. there's not going to be a mobile conveyance where we can say, we can kind of guess who, what the occupancy of that building is based on the parking lot. Even though that's not an exact science by any means, it's still something that I think, we're going to be surprised. And especially since, we're all in the 99% of the fire service that, we're rolling in with, if we have 3 people on the engine, we're having a good day. And, trying to deal with, 12 to 25 people that might be inside that structure as the first arriving engine, it's going to be overwhelming, and we need to just get our poop in a group and, make sure that we are aware of the situation we're going into.
Yeah. And when we talk about faith-based organizations, any meeting that I've been involved with, and I've been involved with a couple of them, no matter what denomination, no matter what religion they are, they all understand their value and importance to their community and the people that they serve. And they are all in when we want to talk to them about telling us what they're doing, when they're occupied, what programs they're running. There's very rarely any pushback. They understand the partnership with the fire service and they have with their parishioners. And very rarely do we get any pushback on stuff that we want to do. They seem to be very willing, more willing than some other groups for sure. And they know we're there we're there to help protect them.
Hey, Chief, I want to get into another avenue of this and pick your brain a little bit on some tactic talk. Let's take minimum staffing, for example. I've run a host of these up in Baltimore City, and very commonly it is due to lightning strikes and some of the spires, steeples. And when we arrive, normally we're going to have, just as the Jersey picture showed, we're going to have something showing, whether it's heavy smoke or fire, from that particular place of origin. Give me, with minimum staffing in mind, give me your top 3 objectives for an engine in a truck upon arrival. Your attack engine and your first arriving truck company. What are the top 3 on each side of that ball that we need to make sure we cover in the first couple minutes upon arrival?
Sure. Great question. So a lightning strike is typically immediately a structural fire, right? Sometimes, it's going to get contents as well, but we were talking about the steeple fire, and I think there was just a picture up there. So that's immediately the structure is involved. So once we have the structure involved, that has to play into our considerations. So I think it's all about life preservation initially. That is the first thought. Is the trucks getting in there or finding someone who can account for all of the life. And then for the engine, it's stretching that hose line from a place of safety, a 2.5-inch line, and making sure that they have enough of a stream that they can hit the uppermost parts of the place of worship. If you have a fire at the top and it's 60, 70, 80 feet up, and we're not hitting that, we have a losing hand, and we must play that appropriately. So we cannot rely, when we walk into it, we cannot rely on the heat condition to give us an indication, because heat conditions, by the time it gets down to us, if it's 60 feet, would be a false indication. So we should not be using that as an indicator. So for the engine, it's getting a positive water source, stretching a 2.5-inch line, and hitting fire immediately. For the truck, it's getting everybody accounted for and opening up those void spaces, and checking to see if we have a basement fire or cellar fire, something below us, because the low-grade fires quickly become fires that are showing through the roof, unbeknownst to us. And the next thing you know, we're in a bad way. So that would be my initial incident objectives based on the scenario that you outlined.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. That's a lot of great information. I want to take you one step farther now. And I'm truck oriented, so that you might as well be speaking Russian when we're talking engines. But
the engine's the one that puts the fire out there, right?
I always hear that, but then I always come back to the fact that no wonder they call for so many engine companies on a fire, because hopefully one of them is going to be capable. That's why you always have so many. You don't need many trucks, because that the guys showing up are going to get the job done. but
Well,
somewhere
so
in that,
yeah,
somewhere in that is
so
the truth. But no, in seriousness,
it's more
with our
victims.
trucks, one of the big things that I say major, obviously many jurisdictions are doing this, but we pull up and you have something evident from a steeple or spire. What is your ideal in your mind? And I know we're limited to obviously where the place of worship is and our streets. And I understand that this is all very kind of rooted in those variables. But ideally, where would you want your truck set up, especially with the frame of mind of, hey, we got a fire here in the steeple, and obviously that is an immediate worry for collapse. Where do we want to start setting these trucks up if we need master streams?
That's a fantastic question. So collapse is always an immediate concern in a place of worship, whether it's new or whether it's old. It doesn't matter. That is an overriding feature. And certain features of that are going to lend itself more to it. So when we take an old style, let's take a Gothic style church, for example, right? So 100 years old, the main ridge pole goes down the center. The exposure 2 and 4 or B and D sides, they are my supporting walls. They are load-bearing walls. So if we have a collapse, those walls could be pushed out. So we want to make sure that we're careful where we place our apparatus on those two corners. We also want to be very careful in any area where there is a steeple or a bell tower. There you go. Perfect. So we want to operate in a corner-safe areas, right? So you take that picture that shows that tower ladder. So he's operating in a corner-safe area. And the only reason why he's in a corner-safe area is because that bell tower is almost like a truncated one. They're kind of small. You can't see it on the picture all that well. But if that was 80 feet up, then that tower ladder basket would be in the collapse zone, even in the corner-safe area, because that would negate that from being a corner-safe area because of the bell tower. So it's a smaller bell tower. So that's why we want to operate in those two areas. So that top picture there that shows the 4 corner-safe areas, right? That's out of the area of the 2 and 4. And as long as there's no bell tower there or steeple, then they're out of that collapse zone too. So that's what we want to avoid, those bearing walls, and then anywhere there's a steeple. Now, those 2 and 4 walls, you typically have a buttress, and you could see from the outside looking at it where the supports, where the main beams are coming down that are supporting, that are going from the ridge to the 2 and the 4, the main supports. Sometimes they'll have what's called a flying buttress, which that makes it goes out a few feet, and that gives you the ornamental work that you see. So there's a great picture of it, that bottom picture there. So that buttress, that tells you that's where the supporting members are. So if we had a lot of cracks in that wall where that arrow is pointing to, that's bad news. That brickwork could also be an arch and be several feet away, and that would be called a flying buttress. So that's the two different terms, buttress and flying buttress. Nice to know. More importantly, know that if we have cracks in those areas, that is really what's supporting those walls and those supports for the walls, those ribs, that's supporting the main part of the church from collapsing. That top picture there shows you the bell tower that's pretty tall, right? That would be an area that we wouldn't consider a corner safe area if we had a truck there. Now, with all of that said, from the minute we arrive on scene, we must be considering the street management plan. What does that mean? Well, I want aerial ladders away from the building, and I want tower ladders set up, because I'm planning in that first 5 minutes, I'm planning the next 5 hours. Now, the first 2 engines not doing that, right? They're planning on getting in there, getting after it, putting it out, and being back in the firehouse in a half an hour. But we know that history, as an incident commander, you must know the history of fires in places of worship and know that these don't end well for us very often. Oftentimes, they wind up with a total loss of the structure, and too often they've wound up with firefighters seriously injured and killed. So we are going to be proactive in setting up our apparatus and putting the tower ladder there, and not only putting them there, but ordering companies to supply that tower ladder. Because once we know we cannot extinguish any more fire on the interior of the church or place of worship, we then have to quickly transition, get our firefighters outside of the inside, and then put water going from the outside. That way we can have an aggressive fire attack from the exterior. So, and I'll go to the fire that I had in the Our Lady of Sorrows church fire, which was January 4th of 2015. I was a battalion chief at the time. I had a lot of knowledge of places of worship. So I thought. I had read what's in Dunn's Collapse of Burning Buildings, the info that's in Brannigan's book, and anywhere else that I could find information about how to fight these fires. So I was well versed on what was written. But there was so much more that I learned after that. But we were setting up tower ladders in front on arrival and had engines supplying those tower ladders. So on arrival, the picture, if you go back to the previous picture a second, the previous picture shows, so that picture, that's the front of the building, and of the actual church. A couple days later, I think that was, but we had heavy fire on arrival outside of the rose window, and then employed the tactics to successfully save the structure. The first line goes in, a 2.5-inch line. They stretch it up upstairs to the choir loft. Choir loft is typically the area found just inside the front. So the choir loft is almost like a mezzanine. That's also where the pipe organ will be. In this case, the pipe organ was just in front of the rose window. The fire was an electrical fire that started in the electric of the pipe organ. It quickly spread up to the top of the church, and then above the wood lath and plaster, the heavy, thick wood lath and plaster. So once fire started to eat at that, first off, it was in an area that we couldn't get to, but now you'll start having plaster falling, and at 30, 40, 50 feet, that can kill a firefighter. So using a thermal imaging camera, and that's the other point that when you asked about the truck tactics earlier, you have to have a thermal imaging camera in there, and you have to be knowing that we're searching for void spaces to know that did fire get in this area and is now above me. Because the fire that gets above undetected into the voids and then into these areas undetected by us, that's when we tend to lose firefighters. So once we had what we could extinguish out, we went out, we got everybody out of the building, and then in the top of that picture, above the rose window, there is a ventilation opening, and that goes directly inside above the plaster. So that is where you're actually going to have your greatest return on investment when we have a fire in the upper reaches of a place of worship, where it's not where the fire is not just only in the main open area of the place of worship. So in this case, they put the fire out that was in the pipe organ and on the mezzanine. They hit the fire that they could that was burning up on the roof level. But then when we transitioned out, we put the tower ladder into that ventilation area. We were able to prevent the fire from consuming the rest of the place of worship. We also put water into the tower ladder water into the rose window, which had been broken out. And when you play the video, the news footage from that, you'll see the video of, excuse me, you'll see the fire that was coming out of the rose window. So we had to extinguish that. So fire in the main area that's out the rose window, we have to put a tower ladder stream into that rose window or into that stained glass window. But if we have it in the above area, in that concealed space, then we have to put it into that other area if the building has it. And how do you know if the building has it? By pre-plan and size up and going around and saying, hey, I saw this podcast last night. Let's go check out our place of worship. Because the one thing is everybody has a place of worship in their first due area, right? You probably have multiple places of worship in your first due area. So fun fact, New York City has more than 6,000 places of worship, several thousand more than anywhere else. So everybody's got them. It doesn't matter. You might not have a traffic light in your response area, but you certainly have a place of worship. That's for sure.
Hey, Chief, let me ask you this, because I know we have to evaluate every building on their own merits. For example, there could be a church inside a strip mall, and we have to look at that structure for what it is. But for our traditional places of worship, like the ones that were up on the screen, would it be a fair, I hate to use the word assumption, but would it be a fair assumption to say that most traditional places of worship will probably have some sort of exposed or unprotected structural components, especially in those archways or, mainly due to interior aesthetics? So is that something we should default to for a traditional place of worship, to look at things being mainly exposed and unprotected for collapse potential?
Yeah, another really, really great point. So Yeah, so they're going to have a lot of ornamental woodwork, a lot of decorations, a lot of stuff that's going to catch fire easily. These places have been burning candles for over 100 years. So where's all that residual wax going, right? It's just building up on areas. Remember, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, the Pope was coming to do a visit. So they cleaned it. They cleaned the church and they cleaned the ceiling of it. And it was like a brownish color beforehand. And when they were done, it went back to like that alabaster white that it originally was. And why? That's because they took all of that stuff off of that. So not only are we going to have all this exposed woodwork and stuff that's going to easily spread fire, but we may have wax residual and all sorts of stuff on there. And most of them don't have sprinkler detection or early fire detection systems in these. So we're going to be notified later of these fires as well. So that's even a challenge for us. And then knowing what are the common causes of fires in these places. And electrical, arson, and candles are among the top three. So if we know that, right? So arson, we got to be careful if we go to an arson fire, no matter what structure it's in. So that's important. And then if it's electrical, a lot of times that means it's starting in the voids. So we're already behind the 8 ball. So when is the first notification of fire? The first notifications for fire at the Notre Dame fire, right, which everybody's familiar with, was smoke coming from upper levels. It already had been burning for quite some time. Now, the alarm system had gone off and they ignored it or whatever had happened with that. Very complicated and complex system. But by the time they knew what was going on, it was in the area of the structure, the attic space, that they call the forest. Anything you're calling a forest in a building is probably not good for firefighters. And it wasn't good for firefighters. And that was a very challenging fire that they had. So the other part of your question is really good too. So you could have a place of worship in a strip mall. You could have it in any other type of structure that it was. In New York City, in my area, in the 4-6, I had a place of worship that was in an old factory. So it had roll down garage doors. It had all sorts of things going on there and many, many different renovations. We also had a place of worship in what used to be a movie theater. So now you have the inherent features of that factory or that movie theater, but now we have these as places of public assembly. And now what does that do and compound some of the other problems we have? So we may not have some of the traditional problems that we would have in a place of worship, but we certainly do in these repurposed structures. So now you take the Limelight, or in New York City, right, which was a discotheque at night, right? It was a repurposed place of worship. We have pizza places and different things in New York City that were places of worship and now aren't. I remember at FDIC in Indianapolis, I was walking around and I went to a bar, a brewery actually, that was an old place of worship. So old places of worship, you'll see them every once in a while vacant, and then they get repurposed as something else. So they never lose their inherent building features. So we could have a fire that's now in a pizza place or is in a brewery or in whatever else they made it. And I even saw one, it was now an apartment building. And where the stained glass windows were now the stairwells. You could see the stairwells. I saw that in Indianapolis as well. And so now that, even though that's an apartment building, it has the same features of a place of worship. So your incident priorities, right, have to be aware of that and make sure that just because it's an apartment or just because it's something different because of the occupancy type, we still have to never forget that building is a 100-year-old place of worship. Act accordingly and remember the same principles that we would employ in a place of worship with all the other hazards that go along with them.
Chief, I had pizza at that place in Manhattan. It's very good pizza, by the way.
It is excellent. Yeah, I mean, every once in a while, when I'm doing research for these, for stuff and staying current, I got to either go to the pizza place or I go to the brewery in Indianapolis, or there's so many different places because they become great cultural places, right? Because the architecture is beautiful. You couldn't build that today if so just take an old one and repurpose it, and you have meeting halls and all the different space that you could possibly want. But just don't forget that original purpose was something different. And likewise, remember that if it's in a strip mall or taxpayer or some other type of building, remember that you have to be aware of those building features for those particular types of construction as well. And that may mean, what type line we stretch, or the entrance, or where the people may be. There's lots of different things. And I think we really have to take a cautious approach when a building's been repurposed for other than its original design, because then the renovations are unpredictable, and what they've done in there is likely unpredictable as well. They could have, that old theater that's converted, and the next thing you know, one theater by me, it had fire escapes on it. Like they had like 5 different places that they do worship in it. If we're not getting in there and doing pre-plan on it, we have no shot, right? So yeah, old theaters converted into places of worship. We have several of them in New York City, and they're beautiful, and they use aesthetics. We have other ones that they use the EFIS, the exterior installation finishing system. In our document, we have a picture of one of those. So an exterior fire gets into the walls on that, and now you have a serious exterior fire in a building that looks like it's masonry from the outside. Again, knowing your buildings, knowing what you have, is really our greatest equalizer, right, on the fire ground. The more we know, the better we could protect and serve and extinguish the fire in the most proficient way.
Hey, Chief, another quick question. This just came to mind. A lot of these places of worship also have either a primary education, an elementary school, middle school, high school attached to them, not necessarily detached, but actually part of that structure. And with a lot of the things that we have going on security-wise, these places have been kind of structurally hardened. So what are some forcible entry thoughts? We have to gain access to these people, obviously during the daytime and school hours, but what are some of the forcible entry considerations that we normally wouldn't see in a place of worship, but if it has a church school attached to it, what are some things that we might encounter as we come up to that scene?
Yeah, so that another really, really good point. So it's possible they're going to have additional security, different locks on the doors. In some places, they may have some type of fortified glass, maybe bulletproof glass, different vestibules that are going to that are magnetic, that are going to be hard for us to get in. But even even ones that weren't designed for that, you take an old Gothic style type of place of worship. You look at the wrought iron that they have covering the basement windows. Sometimes it's like 2 inches thick. So, like, how long is it going to take you if you needed to force even those areas, or cut, to get people out of a below grade area? I mean, they're beautiful, and they're not in the, so you talk about if it's just in a brick, you just take your Halligan or your axe and you knock it a couple of times, it comes off. These are in there, like, they say they don't make buildings the way they used to, especially when you look at this type of construction. There's so many different ways, and the more security they add, the more stuff that they're adding, right? It's just the building wasn't designed to support that load. What if the fire is below, right? When we talk about a basement fire, a cellar fire, and we talk about the ornamental plaster, excuse me, the area around the altar, and then all these different structures, all these different ornamental pieces that are around, they weigh tons. Now, take a floor. If you have a terrazzo floor, you're hiding the fact that there could be a fire underneath you, and it's all on a floor that was a wood floor that's 100 years old, that simply wasn't designed to hold that kind of weight. So you think about all that additional weight that we're adding to that, and just really adding to our adding to the challenge. Again, I think knowing the area, the pre-plans are all going to identify some of that. Maybe the security guards or whoever's there to let people in, to use your scenario, that the fortification that they have, they may be able to disarm that. Because some of these that are magnetic, you could be trying to force that all day long using conventional forcible entry, and you're not going to have great success.
Hey, Chief, I got a question for you. So, new construction church, old construction church. I'm the officer on the engine. We're rolling up. Let's talk about that initial size up. When are we going interior? When are we not going interior? When's our go, no go? Can you talk a little bit about what you're looking at when you initially get there? And from a chief's perspective, what you're looking at once the engine, if the engine decides to go interior, what you're looking for as results of that.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I'm looking at. I want to see where's the smoke? Where's the smoke coming from? Do I have visible fire? Right, for the smoke. What's the volume, velocity, density? Color, stratification. What's it doing? Right. My ventilation profile. Right. I don't expect these are big areas, so I won't get a ventilation limited fire as quickly as I would in a smaller type of structure like a private dwelling. But it doesn't mean I won't, right? An advanced fire could use up a lot of the air, especially if it didn't vent. But we don't seem to see many ventilation limited fires in places of worship. And then the idea is to stretch that line and determine. I want to know immediately if I have a contents fire or if I have a structural fire, and then determining where is the origin of that fire, because we could be easily fooled because we see smoke or a little bit of fire coming from one area when we actually had a fire that started below us. And that's why the importance of checking below us to make sure, and then checking those void spaces to make sure to see what we have. Because now maybe we just have an electrical fire that started in a fixture up in the attic area. Well, we might be able to get up there and check it out and see what it is. But a lot of times the attic area or the bell tower area is a very narrow winding ladder, right? These the stairways are very difficult to navigate. And as the incident commander, you got to decide how much do I want to commit my people going up these spiral staircases, right? Especially if it's high up, and if the bell tower is involved, what if the ropes get involved? Am I going to have a bell that's going to fall on top of my firefighters? These are all the considerations. So I know that's a collapse hazard, but I have collapse components with inside those areas, and you really got to weigh that out. And that's why I say we need to know where that fire start, how advanced it is, and is it into the structure itself. It's a totally different game when the structure is involved as opposed to contents. And how quickly we determine that and get those lines in there is going to determine whether we have even a shot at saving these. But we should always remember that we don't have a good success rate in these structures. And the life hazard is primarily us, and our tactics have to match the fact that we're the life hazard once everybody else is accounted for in that structure.
So let's say I was the engine officer and I decided to go in, and so now my crew goes in. You're a chief coming up. What do you want to see, and what are your decisions about whether or not we continue or we don't continue? I know we talked about it before the show, and you talked about a 2.5 inch line.
Yeah.
Which obviously we should take a 2.5 inch line there. Tell us a little bit about what you're looking for and whether you're going to board it and say, okay, guys, you got to come on out, or let them continue.
Yeah. So for I would be conveying my leader's intent, and that is what I want. Is our idea is you have a minute, maybe not even a minute, to have positive impact on that fire. So it's a 2.5 and a thermal imaging camera into the closest avenue that gives us access to the fire, not necessarily the front door. And we need immediate impact on the fire. And then did we get it, or is it still, or is the camera still showing me that I don't have it? In the meantime, the truck has to know that we're going to be setting up for exterior streams in the event that we need them. And then once we don't have it, like at the fire that I had, my guys knew. I said, you basically got a minute. And afterwards, I made sure I'm constantly talking to my firefighters, not just my officers, but my firefighters and everybody, because I want them to know what I'm thinking as the incident commander. Because if they know what I'm thinking, they know what my incident priorities and objectives are, and they fully understand my leader's intent. Is that I want to put this fire out just as much as you do, but I'm not willing to risk your lives to do that. Because then we get into what I call the risk tolerance pyramid, right? So the risk tolerance pyramid. What is that? Well, so it's a pyramid, and at the bottom of that sits the firefighter, and at the top of that sits the incident commander or chief and the safety officer in chief. So my risk tolerance is very different than the firefighter. My firefighter is willing to go in there and do whatever he's got to do, whatever I tell him to do. I never have to tell my firefighters to get in there, right? It's all about telling them to get out, and then they don't want to get out anyway, right? So by nature, firefighters are eternal optimists, and I love that, right? That's the firefighters that I want to work with, and I do work with. But at the top, I need to be a little bit more pessimistic. and say, you know what? I know we don't have a good record in these, and I know that you're the life hazard, and I know that it's my job because I am the final safety net as the incident commander or safety chief to make sure that I'm looking out for you, because I don't want to be the guy that goes to your family and says, I'm sorry that your husband's not coming home tonight, but he was having fun and we were fighting a fire in a well-involved place of worship that we knew we had no shot of putting out. And now they knocked down the whole structure and it's gone anyway, right? The results in New Jersey, right? That was the results that they got in New Jersey last week were predefined before they stretched a line off of that rig. But they could have badly played that hand and lost firefighters and still had the same outcome of a parking lot at the end of the day, right? So if the people at the highest, if the chief and the incident commander, if those people at that top of that pyramid have the same risk tolerance as the people on the bottom, no bueno, that's not good, right? That means nobody is truly looking out for the entire incident scene collectively for everybody's safety. And that's not saying don't be aggressive, right? Go be aggressive, but let's do it smart and let's do it safely, because, you know, I like to talk about this part as well. Like, some people think like you can't be safe and aggressive at the same time. I say they can and must coexist together, because that's what gives us our ideal outcome, right? And make sure that we're not losing our people in the meantime, because your firefighters don't come to work thinking I'm going to get killed tonight, and that's going to be okay. No one does that, right? So we have to be mindful of there's no life to save here but our own, and that's going to be a parking lot tomorrow, whether we go in that building or we don't go in that building. And it's the incident commander's job to be the unpopular person and make the tough decisions. And they're tough decisions, because I want to be in there too. Ultimately, I'm a firefighter too, but I wear a very different hat when I'm at the top of that pyramid than I do when I'm at the bottom of that pyramid. That's for sure. Bobby, what's that? Your cat behind you? Is that a cat or a snake?
A cat over here, a dog over here. Yes, Chief, you'll probably hear him barking or squawking or something here shortly. Yes. My little zoo.
Nice.
Just to kind of go back to what Trevor had mentioned about the places of worship that have a school attached to it. The unfortunate events that happened in Nashville recently, those events are also occurring in places of worship too. So we talk about seeing those extra security measures in schools, but we're also going to start seeing those, if we haven't already, in the places of worship. So you're going to come in with fortified glass, harder locks to overcome, that kind of stuff in places of worship. So just something to keep on top of, like, as you're sizing this building up, you're doing your pre-plan. Oh, look at that. These are extra fortified doors. The lobby is more reinforced.
Yeah, no one's asking us before they do it, right? They're just doing this, and we just, because they don't know that that's going to cause a challenge to us. They just want to protect their people. So it's up to us to kind of be part of that conversation and have a seat at the table. And you do that by going to pre-plans and telling them, hey, we're all for this, but it'd be nice if you had a panic button that you could hit that opens all the doors.
Yeah,
right?
It's funny you bring it up, Ben. My wife watches all those home improvement shows where they have these competitions and they fix these houses up. And the biggest thing going on right now is all these hidden rooms where you push a bookcase and there's a kid's playroom. And I'm horrified by that thought. A non-sprinklered house or whatever with these hidden rooms. So it's funny you bring that up, because there's just so many challenges. And the reason I bring it up is because you said it, or Chief said it. They don't think about us when they're doing these changes. They're just thinking about keeping the bad guys out, and they're not really thinking about what the repercussions are for us.
Yeah, and Ben, to your point also, I know my son's school, for example, they're actually really good at record keeping, and what I mean by that is they know exactly how many students and staff are on site, and because I'm an analog man in a digital world, so I appreciate the fact that they have a 3-ring binder. Like, if I have to go in and sign my son out of school, I got to go to the binder. I sign my name, but at the same time, I would know that's not my first due, but I would know that if I went there as an IC, I could pull that binder and say, okay, you've got 43 students and 17 staff. And, when I start counting heads, that's what I'm kind of expecting, but at least I know where that resource is. And, just as kind of a completely unassociated side of this, I get thinking about, unfortunately, most of the time when we all when we all have the opportunity to get together as a group, it's either for a wedding or a funeral. And, kind of to, Chief Leeb's point, about pre-planning everything else, I think that collectively we've done a very poor job when we're all sitting in a church together, regardless of what the event is that we're there for. We make the horrible mistake of all sitting in the same row in the same pew. One lightning bolt can take us all out. I think that in the future we ought to pre-plan and spread out a little bit. It's hard to hit a moving target. That's all I'm going to say.
Well played. So on that point, right? So we frequently go into these places, right? And when you go into the church, when you're sitting down all in the same pew, where's the front of the church? The altar, right? So now put your firefighter hat on, and now you're out front. Where's the front of the church? Does that match? So now you're in there and you're searching that pew and you get jammed up, and now you give a mayday. Where are you? You get jammed up and you're at the altar. So when you're mayday, 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 whoever you are, right, to command, I'm trapped. I'm at the front of the church. Where's he going to send people?
Yeah, he's going to send them to the alpha side, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So he's going to send them. Maybe he's going to send them to the choir loft, right? Because that's right inside the front for the incident commander, right? He thinks you're right by the front door. So plain speak, or recognizing that the view from the front of the church is vastly different from inside the church than it is from the incident commander outside. And then start thinking about other structures like that. And you say, well, all right, how about a car wash? Where's the front of a car wash for someone who works at the car wash? Where the cars go in. Oftentimes, where the cars come out is on the front of the building, and it lets the cars go out into the main highway or street. So if you're in a place of worship or you're in a car wash facility, we plain speak,
or even a movie theater, Chief, like a movie theater. Or,
yeah, right. So the more you think about it, you start coming up with others, and you're like, whoa. I could easily in a place of worship where who hasn't been to a movie theater, who hasn't been to a place of worship, and who hasn't been to a car wash. All of those are common places that we go to frequently when we don't have our firefighter cap on. So when we're in there, we default to what we know. And what do we know? I know that I've been to a wedding. I know I go to church. I know I go to the movies. And you default to what you know inside that structure, which could be drastically different. Somebody has to make sure that we break that chain so the Swiss cheese doesn't align. Whether it's the incident commander saying, I'm at the front. When you say, I'm trapped by the front, do you mean you're by the altar? I'm trapped in the front of the movie theater. Are you by the screen? Right? Just making sure that we send the search team. Far too many line of duty fatality reports use communication and not knowing where they were in a structure. Don't make it where you know where you are. You just don't communicate it right because there's a difference in how it's perceived depending on whether you're a firefighter or you're wearing your civilian cap that day.
And Chief, great point. And I've said this often that we're a people divided by a common language. So, I can say something and it means something completely different to Ben or you or Mike or Bobby. But, in my mind, it's clear, but, to whoever's receiving it, it might not be.
Yeah. Great point. Great point.
Chief, did you want me to throw up your video from your church?
Oh yeah. That's that was the recap of that was the news footage of the Our Lady of Sorrows fire that I had in 2015. So play that, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the FDNY's place of worship procedures as well after that.
Okay. So when I go to play this, it's going to take up our whole screen. So Chief, if you want to kind of talk through it, or if we just want to wait till afterwards, but I'm not able to put us onto the side.
Okay. Yeah, I'll interject where necessary. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
A fire tears through a church just minutes before Mass, leaving thousands of parishioners devastated. CBS 2's Alana Gold reports from Queens.
Fierce flames started shooting from Our Lady of Sorrows on 37th Avenue in Corona just before 6 this morning, waking up neighbors who recorded the fiery scene.
It's so sad for the beginning of the year.
Parishioners showing up for Mass and looking up their burned up church in disbelief.
This is my house. This is my heart. This is my everything.
Investigators say the fire started on the balcony where the music director sits during services, and it gutted most of the second floor. The damage so saddening, we saw 7-year-old Kevin Fernandez break down in tears.
Very hard.
Father Thomas Healy leading a prayer outside after canceling all 8 masses scheduled for today.
We have 9,000 people coming here on Sunday. Can you imagine that? And they're all coming because this is home. And this is the house that just burned down.
Trying to give strength to his congregation as he looks for support himself, overwhelmed by the destruction.
We're all heartbroken, all of us.
What's so devastating about this fire is that this church is a staple in the neighborhood, helping thousands in the Latin American community.
We're immigrant people. We have nothing. And the church is their only place of security.
But this fire won't stop the parish from moving forward.
Very slowly. We just have to take it one day at a time.
It's now focused on rebuilding. In Corona, Ilana Gold, CBS 2 News.
Yeah, so you see like how powerful that is. Like that's one of the oldest structures in Corona, Queens, and they rebuilt it, and it's absolutely beautiful now. But they were a soup kitchen. They were a place. They taught people how to speak English there. Like they are the absolute hub of of a low income immigrant community they're trying to pursue the American dream, and it was devastating. And for the fire department to be there and visit them and show their concern and support was like it was invaluable. And the firefighters that work in those areas are just fantastic people. They're into the job. Busy, very busy area of Queens for fighting fires as well, and they certainly get it. And they did a great job because that fire was not a total loss. And the proof is the fact that it's back up and running, and it's again a staple of the community. So again, this fire was in 2015, and then we published the place of worship firefighting procedures for the FDNY in 2019. I was the lead author for that document. We decided we needed to make sure that we had procedures based on all that we learned. We didn't want to lose all that information, and this was the result. So the bulletin is designed to where we didn't talk specifically about different denominations, but what we did talk about was very general, the building features and construction features of these structures. Because if we would have went into specifics of the different types, the bulletin could have been hundreds of pages long. So we kept it very general, and I think for the viewers and listeners, it's most important to discuss the photos. You could certainly share it if you have show notes or anywhere. You could feel free to share this document with anybody who wants it. But so that first picture there that you have, that's and most of these pictures were taken from areas in my first due response area in the 4-6 Battalion. My firehouse was in Elmhurst at the time. I was in Battalion 4-6 and in quarters with 287 engine and 136 truck. And then the first 2 companies at that fire, at the Our Lady of Sorrows fire, was engine 289 and ladder 138, the Corona Tigers. All 4 of those companies, the 2 engines and 2 trucks, are fantastic firefighting companies. So that shows you, that top picture there shows you the rose window or wheeled circular window or wheeled window, most commonly called the rose window. That would give you main access with a stream inside the place of worship. And then where that arrow is above it, that's the area that would get you above the plaster ceiling and would be the initial consideration for a concealed fire. The bottom photo there, that shows you a similar area that's above the plaster in a newer style of place of worship. And that's at the rear of the structure. That's actually that bump out on the bottom is where the altar is. But that top part, it's like a louvered vent, but that's above the area. So even in the rear there, they have a small cemetery in the back there, so it'd be hard to get the rig there. But that's certainly an area that you'd want to get a tower ladder stream into to get into that underside of the area. So that's a good consideration there. If we could go to any other picture. So that's we spoke about the bell tower and the collapse area. The same thing with the, so you keep going. The next photo shows the buttress. We spoke about that and understanding if we have areas that are compromised, that we could have a collapse consideration and keep those areas clear, especially on the 2 and 4 side, those main supporting walls. The next picture, so this is the Our Lady of Sorrows photo looking from the back. If you go down a little bit, there you go. That is the choir loft, and that's the main entrance underneath it. If fire is underneath that choir loft becomes a collapse hazard. So that's the redone church of the inside looking towards the front of the church, the front as defined from the incident commander, the exposure 1 side looking, and that's, again, the redone place of worship. To the points you made earlier, you could see all the ornamental wood that is exposed, as you accurately pointed out earlier. We could scroll down to the next photo. So this photo also, St. Leo's Church in Corona, that shows you clear. They're called clear story windows. So those are windows that are not at the first level of the church. They're mostly ornamental windows. We could vent them, but they're not going to really do much for us, because when we talk about fire dynamics, we want to make sure that we're coordinating our ventilation with our suppression. So just randomly ventilating those windows without suppression really wouldn't give us a lot of benefit. We obviously, if we have a fire that we can control, we are trying to preserve the rose windows, because the stained glass windows, because oftentimes that is valuable, but not at the expense of saving the rest of the place of worship. So we are going to have to take some glass, but again, we're professionals. We should not be taking all glass arbitrarily, and making sure that we are coordinating our ventilation with our suppression. You can see also we could have access problems depending what's going on. It could be far from the street. We could have a parking lot that's full. The rectory could be close. So there's different access problems that we could have as well. Go to the next photo. I think we hit this one good with the corner safe areas, where we want to position our apparatus, or where we don't want to position our apparatus. We could skip that one. So there's a great example of the fly-in buttress. Again, that's just that built-out piece of brickwork that we saw earlier, and now this just transfers the load to that outside leg of the buttress. So if we saw cracks or compromised structural work there, that would be a big concern to make sure that we're keeping people far from that area as well. We could move on. So this is a masonry dome in another type of church, and so the domes are a little bit, they're more stable, but that's on top of a somewhat of a bell tower. So we would still consider that to be a collapse hazard, and that is a newer constructed building, even though it looks older. So knowing your area is critically important for size up factors before the fire. We'll move on to the next one. So this is a mosque. So that structure there is known as the minaret, and they will play music from that or sounds from that will indicate it's time for prayer. That is also considered a collapse hazard due to its height in relationship to the rest of the structure. But again, all of these different places of worships, whether they're the new or the older ones, have inherent structural defects that we need to be aware of and account for. And the mosque is no different than that. Move on to the next picture. So that is a picture of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, and that is the nave area. So the nave is that center aisle of the church. So knowing a couple of the nomenclature is important. The nave is one of them, the transept being the other, which would be the most places of worship are designed in the crucifix design. So if you looked at it from an aerial view, it would look like a cross. And this is the nave part, which is that long part. We'll move on to the next photo. So that's another picture of the rose window. And I think we have a photo later on that will show you the roofing. And that some of these have Spanish tile. And if you start putting a towel ladder onto that or have somebody walking on that roof, that could be dangerous and slippery, especially when there's moss on it or it's wet or not very well maintained. We could move to the next photo. So a steeple, a little bit different, a little narrower. But this is this particular place of worship, again, in my first due response area when I was in Battalion 4-6, is predominantly a wood building. It's going to spread quickly up into all areas of that structure, but it's pretty obvious that it's a wood structure when you're looking at it. But no fire protection systems, but just understanding the difference there between the steeple and the bell tower. We can move to the next one. Again, newer architecture that has that steeple, just showing you that, don't be fooled just because it has brick or it looks like it could be an older one, knowing that, getting inside there and knowing whether this has a lightweight truss construction system or whatever it is very important to know beforehand. And again, that access, it's set back from the street a little bit with only a small little driveway to get in. Go to the next one.
Sorry, Chief, I was muted. It's my first day. This area right here where the mouse is that like a carport, or is that just another entrance to a lower level?
I believe it's just another entrance to the lower level. I can't see it on the picture real quick, real good. Let me see if I could. I'll bring it up. Let me see the pictures that I have the document with me as well. So. Yeah, I think that might even be a separate. Where do you have the mouse? On the lower portion?
Yeah, it's on the lower portion. Like there's this driveway that comes in off the street.
Oh yeah, so I think that gets you access to the back, like a back parking lot. So that like goes under part of the structure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And then the next picture. So that is that's an old movie theater. That's now a place of worship. So you think about it. Also has ephes on the outside of it. That has a fire escape on it, and that the old movie theater sign is on the top of it, right? Which is just another. Now we have a dead load on the top of that. That on top of all the other concerns that we have, and the place they have several rooms, several places of worship. Think about that. That was a movie theater with several different areas to watch movies. Now they have many different areas to worship, which is another issue. So if you go to the next photo is a picture of what was the Limelight and is now a pizza place. Again, it has all the inherent features of a place of worship, even if it's selling pizza, even if it's a nightclub. Don't forget that this is a place of worship when we talk about our strategy and tactics. We can move on to the next photo. And the next photo shows you a building that is part of a strip mall. So if you look to the left of that, you can see that entire block had a fire. And they were able to prevent it from burning down this little place of worship. But this is a wood frame building that has ephes over it. So it looks like it has that masonry on the outside. So that's the exterior insulating finishing system that really is... will burn very nicely once that skim coat of veneer is pierced or damaged, and that could be as simply as a car fire starting on the exterior of the building, and then communicating in a dumpster fire that's close to the building, or it just being damaged from and gives you access to that. So that's another challenge for us when we get there. So the next photo is a photo of a heavy religious structure. That's taking at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and that is several tons. So when you think about the amount of weight that we're putting on these floors, and now if you have a fire underneath it, you quickly understand the severity of the collapse potential that we can have. The next photo 19, is another view of the interior of the Our Lady of Sorrows. Now we're looking from the front, but we could see the high vaulted ceilings. The heat indication at the lowest level would be no indication of the heat level at the top level. A very important consideration. And you can see how beautiful they redid that entire church. And then the final photo shows the roof covering of slate terracotta tiles and the significant dead load that adds, but also understanding that those become projectiles when we're hitting it with a tower ladder stream. So we want to make sure that we have people out of the area. You can also see to the right of this on the exposure 4 side would be the school. It's a separate building, but we would have no access to that side. Likewise, we would have not good access on the exposure 2 side. Although the 2 and 4 sides, we already discussed that we don't want to put rigs there, but there's also a structure to the rear. So there's very limited features, very limited access if we needed to get tower ladders into place in this particular structure. So that's the 20 pictures of the document. And again, you can feel free to share this this document so everybody could operate better at these fires the next time you go out the door, because again, there's so many of these. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 places of worship fires annually in the United States. And you don't have to look that far to hear about them. The LA Times just had an article last week on the fire that LA had on September 11th of 2022. And it talked about May days. It talked about the fire starting on a lower level. It talked about the fire getting into exposed areas and the heavy lath and big pieces falling down and trapping a firefighter. They had several Maydays. It's a very good article. The Battle to Save Victory Baptist Church was the article that was in the LA Times. So that's good because it really highlights some of the stuff that we spoke about tonight. So you don't have to go very far to hear about the next place of worship fire in the United States, because we average several of them a day. Many of them are extinguished quickly, but many of them are total losses, as we talked about the March 21st fire in New Jersey.
Well, thank you, Chief. That's awesome information. We're just over an hour. We like to keep it around there. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I know you probably got a bunch of other things to get done tonight. And there's a angry 2-year-old running around here somewhere. So we'll go ahead and kick it around the horn for our final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up and sign off for tonight. Trevor, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, Ben. First and foremost, Chief Leeb, thank you so much for lending your time and talents to us tonight. And you gave us a lot of great nuggets to think about, not only pre-planning wise, but, strategically and tactically. A couple things that have come to mind as you've been talking, of course, the wheels are starting to turn in my head, is, we talked quite a bit about the fixed facilities of places of worship, the traditional Gothic style churches, and some of the challenges and forethought we need to have on that. And I kind of go back to those places that are multiple use structures. In my first due, my community center on Saturday night could be a wedding reception. On Sunday morning, it's a church. Just like the Ocean City Convention Center for you guys, within one shift, within a 24-hour period, the shell of the building is still the same, but the interior configuration, the fire load, and the occupancy is going to change within twice within 24 hours. You could have a boat show and a cheerleading conference, and it's the same shell, but you have completely different dynamics inside that structure. Same on a smaller scale. I look at my community center, where we have a group that uses our community center as a church, and there's other places of worship also that are fixed structures. But I think that back to Chief Leeb's point is you really need to just get ahead of the curve. You need to pre-plan and understand that just because the exterior bones of the structure remain the same, the interior dynamics can change drastically several times within your own shift. So, that's where it becomes just really necessary to be that nosy engine company, that nosy truck company, or that pain in the ass battalion chief that's going to roll up and say, hey, what's going on here today? And, trying to figure out that if things go from sugar to shit real quick, that you have the opportunity to have the best possible outcome if a negative scenario does come about. But, again, Chief, thank you so much. You gave such a great plethora of information to us, to be able to, start to address these things, I think, in a more intelligent and proactive manner. So again, Chief, thank you guys thank you. And thank you guys very much for being on tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. Mike?
Chief, thank you so much. I'll reiterate that a million times. I love talking tactics. I wish I could have got more of it in with you, but hopefully another time. I know a handful of these podcasts. Obviously, I think the big takeaway here, and not to beat a dead horse, is to get out there and understand your box area. Get out there, get your engine company, your truck company out there, and have them do these walkthroughs of these target hazards, and be aware of what they are, what they house, what they could be being turned into, and to keep up on that point. And of course, again, I always go back to tactics, man. I feel like a lot of our viewers are kind of flexed on what they have to provide as far as a suppression piece. A lot of them will jump on an engine, jump on a truck, just depends on the situation. They're not necessarily assigned permanently to a discipline. And it is important for them to be able to understand right off the bat, whichever one they're arriving on, what do I need to be aware of? So thank you for throwing that out there. And thank you for dedicating so much time to us tonight. You've been amazing.
Thank you. Happy to be the show tonight, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Bobby?
Chief, I really appreciate you being on. I think I can speak for all of us just looking at that church fire you talked about. That's just an amazing stop. That's a well advanced fire, and it looks like you made a lot of really good decisions. They made a lot of good decisions to keep that place above the ground, I guess you could say, or whatever. I know, when you go south, believe it or not, there's actually more of these places of worship than pubs down there. I don't understand that, but that's the way it is. I just really appreciate everything that you gave to us, and I'll keep watching you and learn more nuggets from you all the time. So a pleasure meeting you. And the last thing is, Ray McCormick's been to the house here, and he's never met the cat, and you have, so you're one up on him.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chief. If there's any plugs or special shout-outs that you have for tonight, go ahead.
I appreciate you guys having me on. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can reach me via email, firstresponderconsultant@gmail.com. Otherwise, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. And I, too, can talk tactics all night long. And I appreciate having the opportunity to come on and speak with like-minded individuals. So thank you again for reaching out and having me on your show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Chief. We truly appreciate it. One more thank you, and cheers, brothers. It was a great show. So this will go get posted tomorrow. Sorry. Get posted
Always
tomorrow.
drink. Nothing says F you like someone who cheerses and doesn't drink.
Sorry, my bad.
You can tell a lot about a person when they just go cheers and then they put their drink back down.
Cheers.
You're
my
like,
bad.
yeah. So
sorry.
See, anybody who signed off early, you can get that last little nugget.
and I promise I'm not really that much of an asshole.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, guys.
You knew one of them was going to say that, Ben.
Oh, I expected it. I'd be impressed if they didn't. I'd be a little hurt too. Yeah. So this is going to go as a podcast tomorrow. It'll be on all of the places where you can find podcasts. I say all of them. I don't know. It's going to be on a bunch of them. I can tell you, I'm going to listen to it again. There's so much great information that, listening to it or watching it once, you can't capture all of it. The manual from the FDNY on fires and places of worship, we're going to post that on the website. I'm going to try and put a link to it on the podcast. We're going to put that out as much as we can. Chief, I'll put your email on the podcast, so if people do want to reach out to you with more questions or they want to get up to you, that way they can have that someplace in writing that it's easier to see as well. And then next week we either have Chief Rhodes, or we're going to be talking about. So we're either going to be talking smoke divers or smoke jumpers. I can't remember what's up next, but in 2 weeks we're going to have another great show coming. So just keep watching us, and that's all we got. Thanks for joining us. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.